Welcome, my minions of the ever-encroaching apocalypse. This is See You Next Time. Okay, folks, you might want to strap in for this one. It's a trip. Once again, our dearest brothers Grimm are our guides for this tale. These stories were included in the 1812 very first edition of Grimm's Fairytales, or Children's and Household Tales as it was actually called then, or more accurately.
Kinder- und Hausmärchen.
However, it was removed from the second edition, and one can only assume that that was because the Grimm's story was so grim that it ought only to be told at number 12 Grimold Place by a man who was often mistaken for a Grimm and caused fear of the imminent approach of the Grim Reaper. Don't know what happened there. But yes, it was removed from the second and subsequent editions, and even now is omitted from most versions. So, with just a little further ado, I bring you How Children Played Slaughter with Each Other by the Brothers Grimm. And remember, kids, you can't spell slaughter without a little laughter.
Are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then we'll begin.
Part 1. In a city named Franeker, located in West Friesland, some young boys and girls between the ages of 5 and 6 happened to be playing with one another. They chose one boy to play a butcher, another boy was to be a cook, and the third boy was to be a pig. Then they chose one girl to be a cook and another girl her assistant. The assistant was to catch the blood of the pig in a little bowl so they could make sausages. As agreed, the butcher now fell upon the little boy playing the pig, threw him to the ground, and slit his throat open with a knife, while the assistant cook caught the blood in her little bowl. A councilman was walking nearby and saw this wretched act. He immediately took the butcher with him and led him to the house of the mayor, who instantly summoned the entire council. They deliberated about this incident and did not know what they should do to the boy, for they realized it had all been part of a children's game. One of the councilmen, an old wise man, advised the chief judge to take a beautiful red apple in one hand and a Rhenish gulden in the other, a gold coin weighing about 1/8 of an ounce. Then he was to call the boy and stretch out his hands to him. If the boy took the apple, he was to be set free. If he took the gulden, he was to be killed. The judge took the wise man's advice, and the boy grabbed the apple with a laugh. Thus he was set free without any punishment. Part 2. There once was a father who slaughtered a pig, and his children saw that. In the afternoon, when they began playing, one child said to the other, "You be the little pig, and I'll be the butcher." He then took a shiny knife and slit his little brother's throat. Their mother was upstairs in a room bathing another child, and when she heard the cries of her son, she immediately ran downstairs. Upon seeing what had happened, she took the knife out of her son's throat and was so enraged that she stabbed the heart of the other boy who had been playing the butcher. Then she quickly ran back to the room to tend to her child in the bathtub, but while she was gone he had drowned in the tub. Now the woman became so frightened and desperate that she did not allow the neighbours to comfort her, and finally hung herself. When her husband came back from the fields and saw everything, he became so despondent that he died soon after. The end. Well, bugger me Flipwick and call me Sir Ramesses Niblick III. Pretty full on, huh? There's a couple of things to take a look at here. It appears that these are stories with fairly deep messages around culpability, intent, and indoctrination. It also seems to be wrapped up in theology. The stories raise the idea that children will often mimic what they see in an effort to feel grown up, and also that they have little understanding as to their role in the world, the consequences of their actions, or the nature of life and the permanence of death. We can understand the first story in the framework of the crucifixion of a wee fella you might have heard of, name of Yeshua, or Jeebus, as some would say.
Huh. Hey, did you ever notice this? On page 375 it says Jeebus.
It's supposed to be Jesus, right?
A sacrifice by those who know not what they do, complete with bowl/Holy Grail-based blood collection. The culprit is then judged by the local wise old fella, who, in a beautiful bit of casting, is played by God. Props to the casting director.
That would be an ecumenical matter!
The decision on guilt is made by checking whether the kid will choose a gold coin of probably more value than all the money he's ever seen put together, or whether he'll go for instant self-centered gratification in the form of a fructose-laden sweet apple. The second story is much like the first, but with 400% extra death, and the contrast of childish innocence versus adult vengeance and grief. The mother sees red and loses her mind, enacting the brutal and intentional murder of her second son, followed by her negligence at that moment resulting in the death of the youngest son. The guilt bears down on her and breaks her, with the father following shortly after. All in all, it's pretty horrible, so I think that this is the sort of fairy tale kids should be reading in school, instead of watching Frozen, whinging about Barbie, or bringing out the Pantone colour chart for Snow White or the Little Mermaid.
Sodomy! Sodomy.
Perhaps you yourself would like to slaughter a pig boy, or maybe crucify a monkey for, reasons. And remember, most importantly, when you find yourself, as you inevitably will, in a confrontation with a hostile god, perhaps one that condones slavery and genocide, as long as you've got a good reason, you're having a bad day perhaps, or you're just in the mood for it, you can use the following bit of logic to give 'em what for.
The argument runs something like this. I refuse to prove that I exist, says God, for proof denies faith, and without faith I'm nothing. But, says man, the Babelfish is a dead giveaway, isn't it? It proves you exist, and so therefore you don't. QED. Oh dear, says God, I hadn't thought of that, and promptly vanishes in a puff of logic. Oh, that was easy, says man, and for an encore, he goes on to prove that black is white, and gets killed on the next zebra crossing.
See
you
next time.